Hello from the Fall River Public Library. My name is David Mello. I'm the Supervisor of Children's Services, and I'm going to share with you some of my favorite Thanksgiving Day stories. To start out, I have my little friend Arthur, the aardvark here, and we're going to share Arthur's Thanksgiving by Mark Brown. Arthur's class was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mr. Ratburn was about to announce the director for the Thanksgiving play, The Big Turkey Hunt. Arthur chewed his pencil. "I hope he picks me," whispered Francine. They all held their breath. "I've chosen Arthur to direct the play," said Mr. Ratburn, and he handed Arthur the script. "Me? The director?" said Arthur. "Oh, no," grumbled Francine. "This is going to be a disaster." Arthur's first job as director was to assign parts. The narrator would have the most to say, but the turkey, the symbol of Thanksgiving, had the most important role of all. Secretly, Arthur was glad he wouldn't have to be the turkey. But who would play the part? At lunch, Francine gave Arthur 2 chocolate cupcakes. She wanted to be the narrator. Buster even let Arthur borrow his Captain Zoom spaceman. He wanted to be Governor William Bradford. Being the director seemed like fun. Arthur thought Francine would make a good turkey. "Never," said Francine. "I want to be the narrator. Besides, I have the loudest voice. No doubt about that." Francine would be the narrator. Arthur showed Muffy a drawing of the turkey costume. "Lots of feathers," said Arthur. "It's a very glamorous role." "Yuck! Vomitrious," squealed Muffy. "I should be the Indian princess. I have real braids." "Brain, I've saved the most intelligent part for you," explained Arthur. "No way will I be the turkey," answered the Brain. "I'll be the Indian chief." "Buster, you're my best friend," began Arthur. "The part is real easy, only 1 line, and it's the best in the play." "I want to be Governor Bradford," said Buster. Arthur was so desperate that he asked Binky Barnes. "The turkey is a strong and powerful animal," argued Arthur. "Yeah, without saying a word, it can make you look like a fool in front of the entire school," said Binky. The play was only 6 days away. Where would Arthur find a turkey? Arthur knew he could count on his family. "I'd love to be the turkey," said his father, "but I have a dentist appointment, and I don't want to miss it." "The world is full of turkeys," joked his mother. "You should be able to find one." "I wouldn't be caught dead in that outfit," said his sister D.W. Kind of a silly-looking outfit. Yeah. "Let's talk turkey," said Arthur over the PA system at school. "The best part in the Thanksgiving play is still open. If you're interested, please come to the office at once." No one came to the office. In fact, the principal left the office laughing. Arthur put posters in the cafeteria. He placed ads in the school paper. Nothing worked. Arthur had other problems too. Muffy complained about everything. "I should be narrator. My parents are paying for the cast party," she whined. Francine would not take off her movie star glasses. "They're good luck," she explained, but she was having a hard time seeing what she was doing. Buster couldn't remember his lines. "In 1620, he recited, "we sailed to America on the cauliflower." The rehearsals went from bad to worse. "When the Pilgrims and Indians decided to celebrate their friendship," said Francine, "they began to hunt for a turkey. We cooked beans and pumpkin pies, whispered Sue Ellen, and the Pilgrim men went off to hunt for a turkey. We made cornbread and picked cranberries, said Muffy. Whoops! And the Indian braves went on their own turkey hunt. When it was time for Francine to present the turkey, when the Indians and Pilgrims finally found a turkey, she began, there was great rejoicing. Today, when we think of Thanksgiving, we think of turkey. She glared at Arthur. Don't worry, Arthur promised. I told you I'd find a turkey in time. As a last resort, Arthur decided to rent a real turkey. But that wasn't such a good idea. If you don't get a turkey by tomorrow's performance, said Francine, I quit. And everyone agreed. No turkey, no play. Arthur went home to think. He thought about turkeys while he did arithmetic. He thought about turkeys while he played the piano. And he thought about turkeys while he and D.W. did the dishes. Boy, said D.W., if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. The next morning, Francine, Muffy, and Buster stood before Arthur. They weren't taking any chances. Do we have a turkey? They asked. Arthur just smiled. The whole school filled into the auditorium. Ooh, said the kids when the lights went out. Shh, said the teachers as the curtain went up. In 1620, we sailed to America on the Mayflower, recited Buster proudly. Whew, said Arthur. The play continued smoothly. Muffy didn't drop the cranberries. The Brain had his costume on correctly. Sue Ellen said her lines in a loud, clear voice, and Francine had even taken off her movie star glasses. And then it came time for Francine's big speech. She crossed her fingers and began. When the Indians and Pilgrims finally found a turkey, there was great rejoicing. Today, when we think of Thanksgiving, we think of turkey. And there was a lot of fumbling behind the curtain. Arthur took a deep breath. He walked on stage. As soon as he did, the audience began to laugh. Arthur turned bright red. This was going to be even worse than he had thought it would be. The turkey, Arthur began, is a symbol of togetherness and Thanksgiving, said a chorus of voices behind him. Arthur turned around and smiled. I guess Mom was right. The world is full of turkeys. Okay, turkeys, all together now. Let's hear that last line, loud and clear. And just look at everyone playing the turkeys. Happy Thanksgiving. And so it looks like Arthur's play was a success. And that's Arthur's Thanksgiving. Clever Arthur. Our next story is about another friend of mine, Franklin the Turtle. And this is Franklin's Thanksgiving. Franklin liked everything about Thanksgiving. He liked eating pumpkin fly pie and cranberry jelly. He liked making cornucopias and corn husk dolls. But most of all, he liked having his grandpa and grandma come out for dinner. It was the family tradition, and Franklin could hardly wait. A week before Thanksgiving, a postcard arrived from Franklin's grandparents. "Oh dear," sighed Franklin's mother. "Grandma and Grandpa can't make it back for the holidays." "But they have to," cried Franklin. "They're always here for Thanksgiving." Franklin's mother gave him a hug. "There will still be the four of us," she said. "It won't be the same," Franklin grumbled. Over the next few days, Franklin was so busy that he didn't have much time to think about Grandma and Grandpa. He helped his mother pick apples and make applesauce. He helped his father dig up vegetables and store them in the cellar. Franklin and Bear helped Harriet and Beatrice pick berries and gather nuts. In the gardens and orchards, forests and fields, everyone was bringing in the harvest. Franklin counted all the jars of jams and preserves. "I think this year was the most bountiful year," announced his father. "He could feed the whole town." "I just wish we could feed Grandma and Grandpa," said Franklin. His mother agreed. "We'll miss having their company for sure," she said. At school, Franklin's class made a harvest quilt and learned how the early settlers celebrated Thanksgiving. "What are you doing for Thanksgiving, Mr. Owl?" asked Franklin. "I'll have dinner with my mother," he replied. "Our relatives can't visit us this year." "Ours neither," said Franklin. Then he had an idea. He invited Mr. Owl and his mother for dinner. "It's all right with my parents," Franklin explained. "They want company." "Well, thank you, Franklin," said Mr. Owl. "We'd be delighted to come." Franklin smiled. This would be a wonderful surprise for his parents. At home, Franklin's mother looked at the berry pies cooling on the windowsill. She had an idea. She walked over to Bear's house and invited the whole family for Thanksgiving. "It will be a wonderful surprise for everyone," she explained. In the garden, Franklin's father waved to Mr. Mole. "Are you going to your sister's for Thanksgiving this year?" he asked. "Oh, not this year," replied Mr. Mole. "With my broken ankle, I can't go very far." Franklin's father had an idea. He invited Mr. Mole for dinner. "It will be a wonderful surprise for everyone," he explained. After school, Franklin went home with Moose. That's when he had another idea. It was the Moose family's first Thanksgiving in Woodland. Franklin invited them to dinner. "It's all right with my parents," he explained. "They want company." "We'd be delighted," replied Mrs. Moose. Franklin smiled. His surprise was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. On Thanksgiving morning, Franklin got up early to help with dinner. He stirred soup and shucked corn, then he set the table for 9. Franklin's father counted the place settings. He shook his head and reset the table for 5. Franklin's mother looked at the table. She was puzzled, but she added 3 more place settings. And everyone took turns peeking out the window, watching for the surprise guests. Mr. Owl and his mother were the first to arrive. "Surprise!" Franklin shouted to his parents. "This is a surprise," they exclaimed. Then Franklin saw the Bear family and Mr. Mole. Now everyone was surprised. All the guests crowded inside, holding platters and bowls heaped high with food. Franklin and his parents laughed and tried to explain what had happened. "Well, we sure have plenty to eat," declared Franklin's mother. "We just don't have plenty of room." Franklin knew they had a big problem. The Moose family hadn't arrived yet. Franklin looked around. There wasn't one bit of room inside, but outside. And suddenly, Franklin knew what to do. Moose and his family arrived as all the others came out the door. Everyone carried food and dishes, tables and chairs. "What's going on?" asked the moose. "We're eating our Thanksgiving dinner in the field," answered Bear. "Just like the early settlers," said Franklin. It was a wonderful afternoon. Everyone ate lots of good food, and everyone said how thankful they were for good friends and family. Franklin was thankful for 3 helpings of pumpkin fly pie. "I'm eating Grandma and Grandpa's share," he explained. And soon the sun was setting, and it was time to go home. "This was a wonderful day," said Franklin's mother, and Franklin agreed. "Let's do it again next year," he said, and everyone laughed and cheered. Grandma and Grandpa phoned later that night, and Franklin told them about the new Thanksgiving tradition. They promised that next year they wouldn't miss it for anything. Franklin smiled. He might not get 3 helpings of pumpkin fly pie next year, but he knew he'd still be thankful. And that's Franklin's Thanksgiving. Can I read that last page again? Yeah. Grandma and Grandpa phoned later that night, and Franklin told them about the new Thanksgiving tradition. They promised that next year they wouldn't miss it for anything. Franklin smiled. He might not get 3 helpings of pumpkin fly pie next year, but he knew he'd still be thankful. And that's Franklin's Thanksgiving. And now, if you're like my family, there's lots of things on the Thanksgiving Day table on Thanksgiving Day. Cranberry sauce and carrots and mashed potatoes, and you might find some squash on your table, like on mine. Well, here's a very unusual story about a squash. It is called Mrs. McNosh and the Great Big Squash. The first day of spring, Mrs. Nellie McNosh went out to her garden and planted a squash. I'll start with my intro again. Now, most families have plenty of wonderful things spread out on their table on Thanksgiving for Thanksgiving dinner. You'll find things like cranberry sauce and mashed potatoes, turkey, of course, all sorts of wonderful things. And one of those items you might find are some squash. This is a most unusual story about a very unusual squash. It is Mrs. McNosh and the Great Big Squash by Sarah Weeks. The first day of spring, Mrs. Nellie McNosh went out to her garden and planted a squash. She pushed the seed in with the tip of her toe, and the moment she did it, it started to grow. At first it was round and as big as a head. In fact, it looked just like the paperboy Fred. Then it turned yellow and bumpy and fat. It rolled from the garden and flattened the cat. It knocked over trash cans and ran over toes. It twisted the sprinkler and plugged up the hose. It crashed through the clothesline and smashed through the fence, scaring the pants off of 2 elderly gents. Poor Nellie was worried. She said, Oh my gosh! There's got to be simply some way to slow down this squash. She slapped it and scolded it, pinched it and kicked it, and then she took hold of its stem and she picked it. Now what do I do? Wondered Mrs. McNosh. I've got to find something to do with this squash. There isn't a place in the world it will fit. It's as big as a house. Wait, said Nellie. That's it. And so by the light of a big yellow moon, she scooped and she scraped with a long-handled spoon. And when the sun rose, where was Nellie McNosh? Curled up, sound asleep, in her big yellow squash. Now let's hope you don't have that problem with your squash on your table this Thanksgiving. Well, we hoped you enjoyed these stories for Thanksgiving time, and we wish you and your families a very pleasant Thanksgiving.